Hi, I'm Robert Orm, and I'll be reading you today's edition of the Fall River Herald, dated Monday, October 28th, 2024. Catholic Charities Mixes Faith and FEMA by Dan Medeiros. Hurricane season may be winding down, but it's not over, with forecasters concerned that more major storms could brew in the Atlantic in the coming weeks. And meanwhile, the after effects of Hurricanes Helene and Milton are long lingering for those in the South. It's a situation the people at Catholic Charities USA are well familiar with. The Diocese of Fall River recently hosted the Disaster Response Academy at White's of Westport, a 3-day seminar intended to train dozens of staff across the region in how to respond with compassion and expertise to any size disaster. Jennifer Dier, Director of Capacity Building at CCUSA, said the organization responds to incidents as small as apartment fires and as large as Category 5 hurricanes. In all cases, she said, the needs are going to be the same. People are going to need food and water. They might need temporary shelter. They're going to need emotional, physical, spiritual support. Catholic Charities USA, founded in 1910, is what Susan Mazzarella of the Fall River Diocese called the Church's human services arm. It comprises 168 member agencies nationwide, including Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Fall River, which Mazzarella said is marking its 100th year. The group last year served 15 million people nationally, including the homeless, unemployed, migrants, refugees, and families recovering from natural disasters. The national arm provides help with affordable housing, immigration assistance, disaster relief, and more. We're lucky we don't get hit by hurricanes, Mazzarella said of the Fall River Diocese. But we still have the migrant crisis. We still have fires that erupt all over Fall River and New Bedford, and we get called upon to support communities whenever there is a crisis. The Disaster Academy included workshops focused on teaching staff how to take charge in an emergency, navigate the workings of FEMA, create recovery plans, handle trauma response, and more. The motto of Fall River's branch of Catholic Charities is Service Anchored in Faith. Dier said faith and a duty to aid those most needy informs their work at all levels. What we know is that the poor and vulnerable that we serve day in and day out will be disproportionately impacted by a disaster, Dier said. And so when we think through our response to a disaster, we're really thinking through who do we serve now, and how are they likely to be impacted? Catholic Charities agencies have responded to natural disasters like Hurricane Sandy and the most recent hurricanes in Florida, and to tragedies like the 9/11 attacks. In 2022, staff responded to Martha's Vineyard, where under Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' direction, several dozen South American migrants were transported on chartered plans, abandoned with no advance notice to social service agencies. Dier said she has noticed an uptick in Catholic Charities' responses to flooding incidents in recent years. It's unclear if global climate change is a factor. Regardless, the need faced by the victims is always the same and often compounded over time. After a disaster, unemployment rises, and so poverty rises. And then you have an increased number of vulnerable people for the next disaster, she said. And so there are these ever-increasing disasters and these ever-increasing populations that are impacted over and over again. Dier said when a disaster strikes, people often feel an impulse to rush to the scene to help or to gather supplies for them. This may come from a good place, but isn't always the best way to help, she said. We always encourage individuals to give cash, Dier said. It provides the most flexibility on the ground. She said in disasters, material needs can change daily. People in a disaster zone may put out a call for fresh socks one day and receive ample donations, she said, but then be stuck with too many socks when donors haven't kept up with the latest info and keep sending out-of-date supplies. Money donations to disaster zones also stimulates the local economy, and letting disaster victims purchase their own items affords them dignity. Deere said even that strategy is informed by their faith. One of our tenets of Catholic social teaching is subsidiarity. Those decisions are made at the most local level, Deere said. For me to make decisions about what is best to purchase for somebody else, it doesn't feel as comfortable as sending money and allowing them to do that. Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Fall River runs on monetary donations to sustain its work. It also accepts donations of school supplies for needy students and food donations for the Solanus Casey Food Pantry in New Bedford, which it said is the state's largest food pantry south of Boston. To learn more or to volunteer, go to https://www.ccfrdioc.org. Bacteria from Foodborne Illness Put Under the Microscope by Eduardo Cuevas. E. coli, Listeria, and Salmonella bacteria have been making news again for sickening Americans. In recent months, authorities say dozens of people have been sickened with E. coli from eating McDonald's Quarter Pounders, and one person died. 59 people were hospitalized, and 10 people died in a Listeria outbreak linked to deli meat. And 93 people in about a dozen states were infected with Salmonella from eggs. What exactly are these tiny troublemakers? We put them under the microscope. E. coli. Different types of Escherichia coli, or E. coli, bacteria exist in food, water, and humans' and animals' intestines, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said. They are often transmitted through food or water contaminated by human or animal feces. Some forms can make people sick. The Shiga toxin-producing infection, identified in the McDonald's outbreak, is the most common E. coli illness. It causes severe stomach cramps, diarrhea, and vomiting. People can develop kidney issues that require hospitalization. Symptoms typically start 3 to 4 days after consuming contaminated food or water. Listeria. Listeria is the third leading cause of foodborne illness death in the U.S., according to the CDC. The bacterium is unique because it thrives in cool, damp environments, the U.S. Department of Agriculture said, meaning it can grow when refrigerated. There are two types of illness, intestinal and invasive. Intestinal illness is harder to diagnose because laboratories don't regularly test for listeria, the CDC said. Symptoms, such as diarrhea and vomiting, tend to be mild and usually start within a day of eating contaminated food. Some develop the invasive form, which spreads beyond the gut and is dangerous. Around 1 in 6 people with invasive listeria illness die. Symptoms start around 2 weeks after eating food contaminated with listeria. People can expect fever, muscle aches, and fatigue that feels like the flu, headache, stiff neck, confusion, loss of balance, and seizures. Pregnant people may experience miscarriage, stillbirth, premature delivery, or a life-threatening infection to a newborn. Salmonella. Salmonella causes the most common foodborne illness deaths. These bacteria live in people and animals' guts. Fewer than 100 of more than the 2,500 types of salmonella cause illness. Illness is triggered from eating contaminated food, drinking or having contact with water, or touching feces, animals, or animals' habitats. Symptoms usually start between 6 hours and 6 hours and 6 days after consuming bacteria, the CDC said. Most sick people have stomach cramps and diarrhea, and some have headache, nausea, vomiting, and loss of appetite. They usually recover without treatment in 4 to 7 days. Those more at risk of severe illness include young children, elderly people, and people with weakened immune systems. Consumers can take steps to reduce the risk of illness. To start, check FDA.gov for food safety alerts and recalls. Regular hand washing with warm soap and water before and after preparing food or after touching an animal or contaminated items is an easy way to reduce risk of illness, the USDA said. Clean and sanitize items or surfaces that come in contact with raw foods or waste. Emerald Eatery opens in New Orleans by Ashley Schuler. Emerald Lagasse brought far more than a dash of excitement to the South Coast this spring when the Fall River-born celebrity chef made a surprise visit to his hometown to reminisce and eat his way through the menus of several notable South Coast eateries. That culinary tour, which included stops in Fall River, Westport, New Bedford, and East Providence, was about more than just leisure. It was part of a larger mission for the cooking icon. Lagasse returned to the place that first sparked his love of cooking in search of inspiration for his newest passion project, his first Portuguese restaurant, described as a love letter to his family's roots. Now those flavors of Fall River have finally made an official debut in the Bayou as the James Beard Award and Emmy-winning chef opened 34 Restaurant and Bar in New Orleans on Wednesday, October 23rd. Looking for an excuse to take a road trip from New England to NOLA? You've got it. 34 Restaurant, a collaboration with his son E.J. Lagasse, is Lagasse's tribute to my mom and to the Portuguese culture and people, he said in an interview with the Herald News following his April trip to the South Coast. A slideshow of photos from Lagasse's culinary travels across Portugal and Greater Fall River are currently featured on the website for 34 Restaurant, with nods to local spots such as Portugalia Marketplace, TA Restaurant, Sa Grace Restaurant, and more. Lagasse, who grew up in Fall River's South End, credits his late mother for cultivating his interest in the culinary arts at an early age, and said his experience working in small Portuguese kitchens across the city still serves as a strong influence in his cooking. My mom, Hilda, was Portuguese, originally from the Azores, and I grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts, which is home to one of the largest Portuguese-American communities in the U.S., Lagasse told Food and Wine in an article this week about the opening of 34. Much of my childhood and upbringing, whether through my mom, who ran the house and kitchen, or the community, was saturated in Portuguese culture. At 34 Restaurant in Louisiana, Lagasse is serving up those Portuguese traditions with a modern twist. That starts with the decor, which Lagasse wanted to be transportive with its European-inspired touches, he recently told Travel Plus Leisure. The 245-seat restaurant, located at 710 Barron Street, is adorned with ornate Portuguese azulejo tiles, wood accents, and various shades of green, Lagasse's signature color. And no Portuguese restaurant would be complete without the appearance of the Galo de Barcelos, a rooster that serves as an iconic Portuguese symbol of good luck. A rooster painting greets guests at the entrance of 34. Lagasse's restaurant portfolio is diverse, with concepts ranging from Cajun to steakhouse. 34 centers around Portuguese tapas, with a hint of Spanish influence. Highlights of the menu made for sharing include Lagasse favorites such as bacalhau à brás, a staple of Portuguese cuisine, clams in vinho verde, as well as caldo verde, arroz de pato, duck rice, with chorico and mushrooms, arroz de lagosta, lobster rice. And you won't want to pass on dessert, which features Lagasse's take on the classic pastéis de nata, as well as Basque cheesecake and Azorian pineapple Fosters. According to 34's website, a Hamon bar with countertop service and tile-clad DJ booth are focal points of the space. The restaurant celebrates not only the food and design of Portugal, but also the sounds, with music from local and touring DJs, it states. Back in May, Lagasse expressed his excitement for his unique new addition to the New Orleans food scene. I don't know any restaurant like it in the South. And while Portuguese cuisine is not a familiar fare there as it is in this corner of southern New England, Lagasse predicted it would play well in a region receptive to embracing different cultures and cuisines. New Orleanians know and want good food, and they recognize when it's made with love. So I'm excited to share my passion for Portuguese food and flavors, Lagasse said in a recent Food and Wine interview. Axe Throwing Bar offers fun, offbeat way to unwind, by Emma Rindlisbacher. For Ferris Oja, downtown Middleborough was the perfect location for his new axe-throwing bar, hatchet in hand. I grew up in Raynham, he said. It's an area that I'm familiar with, and a community that I know, a community where I want to have something fun for people to go out and do. And since the bar is opening in July, Oja and his customers have been hitting a lot of bullseyes. There hasn't been one person who hasn't been able to get the axe in the target, he said of his customers. If you get a bullseye, you got to ring a bell, and when people get it, they get so excited and high-five each other. Aside from being a lot of fun, after learning how to throw the axes, customers can also play competitive games similar to darts. It's not just throwing, you get real competitive, Oja said. The bar also offers other activities, including arcade games and a foosball table, and on some Monday nights, the bar hosts line dancing nights. It's a part of the business's strategy of providing customers with fun activities to do on their nights out, as opposed to just sitting down at a restaurant. We allow people to bring their own food, Oja said. Usually how people go out is they get food and drinks, but with this you can do an activity. Oja said that he is gearing up for what he anticipated would be a busy fall and winter for the business. Right now there's nice weather, he explained, so people want to be outside. In late fall, winter, and early spring, when there's not much to do outside, everyone's going to be looking for things to do inside, and we're going to be that place, he said. Hatchet in Hand is located at 85 Center Street in downtown Middleborough. The building was formerly the location of a Benny's store before it closed in 2017. Hatchet in Hand is open Wednesdays and Thursdays, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., Fridays 4 p.m. to midnight, Saturdays noon to midnight, and Sundays noon to 8 p.m. Customers can either walk in or reserve axe-throwing lanes ahead of time by booking a time slot on the business's website. The bar also opens for line dancing nights on select Mondays. Oja said that customers should check the bar's Facebook and Instagram pages to be notified of which dates line dancing events will be held at the bar. Solid Economy Could Benefit Harris, by Paul Davidson. With less than 10 days remaining before the election, the economy has continued to line up in Vice President Kamala Harris's favor. Gas prices and mortgage rates are down. Inflation-adjusted incomes are up. and consumer confidence is tepid, but well above the threshold that historically has signaled a recession. In past presidential races, those kinds of economic vital signs have reliably foreshadowed victory for the incumbent party in the White House. And Moody's Analytics' final election computer model says there's a 55.5% chance Harris will narrowly win based largely on those positive indicators. But this is anything but a normal election. Typically, the economic indicators and Americans' perception of them match, yet some voters have continued to say former President Donald Trump would be a better steward for the economy than Harris, a view that forecasters say has been molded by the inflation spike of 2021 to 2023. To be sure, the annual inflation rate has eased from a 40-year high of 9.1% in mid-2022 to 2.4% in September, modestly above the Federal Reserve's 2% goal, based on the Consumer Price Index. But prices are about 20% higher than they were when President Joe Biden took office in January 2021, and economists say that still has many voters leaning toward Trump. Moody's economist Justin Begley says the firm's election model reckons Americans' most recent experience of inflation, the job market, and economic activity will hold sway and give Harris a slight majority of the vote in enough of the 7 swing states to nudge her to an electoral college victory. That's a tailwind for Harris, Begley said of the sturdy economy. Perceptions of the economy aren't outweighing the hard data in our model. Here's a quick rundown. Gasoline prices. Regular unleaded gas prices averaged $3.15 a gallon nationally on Thursday, down from $3.54 a year ago and $5 in summer 2022, according to AAA. Prices would have had to jump to $3.77 a gallon or higher in the July-September quarter to swing the contest to Trump, the Moody's model shows, though a big spike right before the election also could sway votes. Pump prices, which consumers see daily, serve as the most visible proxy for inflation, Begley said. Mortgage rates. 30-year fixed mortgage rates are averaging 6.44% according to Freddie Mac. That's up from about 3.7% before the pandemic, but down from nearly 8% a year ago. Rates would have needed to climb to 7.45% to move the needle from Harris to Trump, Moody's said. Inflation-adjusted income growth. Average incomes after figuring inflation are up 1.8% from a year ago. They would have had to tumble 8.1% annually to change the election outcome, Moody's said. That's a telling measure because it accounts for inflation, the health of the job market, and Americans' purchasing power, Begley said. Consumer confidence. In September, consumer confidence fell by the most in 3 years on concerns about a softening labor market and business conditions, the Conference Board said, though job growth remains healthy. The Consumer Confidence Index at 98.7 is down from its post-pandemic average and significantly below its post-crisis average, but well above the 80 threshold that signals a recession. Despite strong economic and job gains, consumer sentiment has been dampened by inflation the past 3 years. Confidence can foretell consumer spending, which makes up 70% of the economy. Predicting the presidential race based on these measures isn't an exact science, Begley said, and the thresholds vary based on circumstances each election year. Big changes that fall short of the benchmarks also could alter the outcome, especially in tandem with other developments, such as an escalation of the conflict in the Middle East. But since 1980, each incumbent party presidential candidate whose economy has stayed on the positive side of all the key thresholds has won, and each that has fallen short on one or more of the measures has lost, Begley said. Despite Harris's advantage in the Moody's model, Begley called the race a toss-up and said it wouldn't take much for the model to assign Trump a win. For example, he said, if Trump can drive just a 1.5% stronger Republican turnout than he did in 2020, and or overperform among independents, he will win, along with myriad other possible developments. Other forecasters give Trump a decided edge on the economy, saying Americans' views will carry more weight in the voting booth than positive economic data. It appears that the experience of high inflation continues to dominate voters' perception of the economy, said David Self, Nomura's chief economist for developed markets. As a result, although forecasters overwhelmingly see the economy as doing well, Self believes it's more of a liability for Harris than a strength. Overall, Harris had a 46 to 43% lead over Trump this week, according to the latest Reuters Ipsos poll. But 70% of registered voters said the cost of living was on the wrong track, and 60% said the economy was headed in the wrong direction, according to the poll. 46% said Trump had a better approach on the economy, compared with 38% who favored Harris, though Harris has narrowed Trump's lead on that issue across several polls in recent weeks. A Wall Street Journal poll had Trump leading broadly, 47% to 45%. Oxford Economics has come up with two divergent election models that depend on how swing voters view inflation. If they focus on the rate of change in consumer prices rather than the price level, Harris is likely to win the electoral vote 281 to 257, Oxford economist Bernard Yarrow said. But if enough independent voters in the battleground states still feel sticker shock from the alarmingly high inflation of 2021 and 2022, Trump is projected to win the Electoral College, 297 to 241, Yarrows wrote. We've reached the halfway point of our program, and regular listeners are aware that at this stage of our broadcast we move to the obituaries. Edward Vivieros, born on July 20th, 1936 in Fall River, Massachusetts. He was preceded in death by his parents, Joaquim and Mary Medeiros Vivieros, his beloved wife, Muriel, and his siblings, Raymond, Evelyn, and Carol, and granddaughter, Alyssa Correra. Edward is survived by his daughter, Sharon Rice, and her husband, Christopher Rodriguez of Norton, daughter, Sherry Correra, and her husband, Arthur of Rehoboth, son, Edward E.J. Vivieros, Jr. of Somerset, son, Stephen Vivieros, and his wife, Christine of Rehoboth. He also leaves his significant other, Badeline Barbosa. Services are humbly entrusted into the care of South Coast and Boyko funeral homes, celebrating a life well lived. John E. Eckersley, Jack, age 86, of Tiverton, passed away Wednesday, October 23rd, at Charlton Memorial Hospital, Fall River. He was the husband of Dorothea Aruda Eckersley, to whom he has been married for the past 36 years. Born in Fall River, a son of the late John D. and Helen M. Keating Eckersley, he spent his youth in Fall River and lived in Westport for many years before moving to Tiverton 36 years ago. In addition to his wife Dorothea, he is survived by one son, retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Eckersley, Connecticut State Police of Naples, Florida, one granddaughter, Bailey R. Eckersley. He was the father of the late Kimberly A. Eckersley. Visitation will be held Wednesday, October 30th, from 9:15 to 10:15 a.m. in the Waring-Sullivan home at Cherry Place, 178 Winter Street, Fall River, followed by his funeral mass at 11 a.m. in St. Teresa's Church, 265 Stafford Road, Tiverton. Contributions in his honor may be made to the Wounded Warrior Project, P.O. Box 758516, Topeka, Kansas 66675. Burial in St. Patrick's Cemetery, Fall River. For tributes or directions, please visit www.waring-sullivan.com. Cemeteries Not Just for Burying Dead, by Phaedra Trethan. It all began with Rudolph Valentino. The silent movie star died a shocking death in 1926 at just 31. He is buried in Hollywood Forever Cemetery. The cemetery's operators began showing his movies for devoted fans who showed up to remember him decades later, and noticed the gathering grew year after year. Why not host more movie nights, they thought, especially in the resting place of Hollywood royalty, Judy Garland, Cecil B. DeMille, Mickey Rooney, and Douglas Fairbanks, to name a few. We had to find a creative way to find income, said Hollywood Forever co-owner Yogu Kanthia, especially after spending nearly $20 million to fix its mausoleums and grounds. Hollywood Forever isn't the only cemetery offering programs beyond the usual historic tours and talks. Visitors at many U.S. cemeteries can check out movie screenings, market days, concerts, art installations, and performances. Some are finding ways to change the conversation around death, and bringing life to spaces previously thought of only for the dead. The events bring us additional revenue, but also awareness, Kanthia said. Hollywood Forever now hosts not only movie screenings, which attract as many as 3,800 people, but podcast tapings, readings, and the largest Day of the Dead observance in the U.S., drawing 30,000 people. Cemeteries as public spaces are a new old thing, said Sarah Chavez, executive director of the Order of the Good Death. The group works to bring awareness and understanding to end-of-life issues and dying, emphasizing that they're a natural part of life. Cemeteries, Chavez said, used to be public parks, green spaces in increasingly crowded cities where families could stroll, picnic, and take in natural beauty. Some had to sell tickets to control crowds. The trend returned during the pandemic lockdowns, when cemeteries were one of the only safe places in some cities, she said. Laurel Hill, a historic 265-acre cemetery and arboretum in Philadelphia, is within a trail system, so it's a regular walking spot for city residents, President and CEO Nancy Goldenberg said. There's a resurgence of interest and use of cemeteries as common public space, the way it used to be, she said. Laurel Hill hosts death cafes, book clubs, movie screenings, even horticulture therapy to help people deal with grief. Its annual Market of the Macabre, with more than 80 local artists and vendors, drew 5,000 people this year. It operates on 3 pillars, Goldenberg said: eternal rest and what we do around death, recreation and Laurel Hill's role as open public space, and civic value, its place in Philadelphia history. Laurel Hill has recorded oral histories from longtime residents of the neighborhood where the cemetery is located, a neighborhood that's seen a great deal of growth and change. They've woven those oral histories into tours. Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn is a similarly historic green space that became an oasis as the once bucolic borough grew increasingly urbanized. Greenwood partners with local arts organizations. In one of its signature events, Nightfall, visitors wend through illuminated paths, finding musicians, storytellers, circus performers, and short films. It hosts Day of the Dead and Juneteenth observances, and a commemoration of the 1776 Battle of Brooklyn. Harry Wheel, Greenwood's vice president for education and public programming, said that even though autumn is the cemetery's busy season, it does not host Halloween programming. We are an active cemetery with burials and cremations every day, he said. We are in some ways trying to demystify the cemetery. We don't want people to think it's a ghoulish space or only a place to visit during spooky season. Chavez, with the Order of the Good Death, said people sometimes forget that cemeteries adhere to perpetual care practices, meaning that those buried there and their loved ones believe the grounds will always be cared for and maintained, preserved, and protected. Indeed, Laurel Hill, Hollywood Forever, and Greenwood are all still active cemeteries with burials, funerals, and loved ones visiting their departed loved ones every day. Wheel said Greenwood's events help the cemetery recruit the next generation of people who will appreciate its value. As a cemetery fills up and time goes by, families stop visiting. So how do we get the next generation to love the space and want to invest in this space? Greenwood's events also help them keep educating the public. Higher-end activities finance low-cost and free events for the wider community. Goldenberg, Wheel, and Kenthia each said they've never encountered serious problems with anyone acting disrespectfully. People, each of them said, seem to understand that they're in a space that is sacred and requires a certain decorum. We tell people that this is not Carnegie Hall, Wheel said. Still, he said, the whole point of a cemetery, historically, is that it's meant for the living. It's the living who decide what memorials go up and how often they visit. What we're doing is expanding who those people are. It's important for us to be mindful in our programming and be respectful in what we do. The Order of the Good Death wants people to understand the cultural differences around how we think about death, Chavez said. If people deem a practice or an event disrespectful or undignified, I usually ask, who gets to decide what's disrespectful? What is undignified? Other cultures, she said, enjoy honoring the dead through life-affirming activities. Meals, noise, enjoyment are all ways of honoring the dead and creating spaces to grieve in healthy ways. She added, in death, people still want to be connected to life, whether through nature or with events and celebrations. Kenthia said some events at Hollywood Forever, such as an annual remembrance of Johnny Ramone, who's buried there, are parties, a way to celebrate the lives people lived and the ones who are still living. Goldenberg has heard from people who chose Laurel Hill specifically because it's a place still full of life. They're big supporters of the cemetery being used. They love to see life here. Israeli strikes kill dozens in North Gaza. By Nidal al-Moghrabi, Elweli, and Ari Rabinovich. Israeli military strikes killed at least 45 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip on Sunday, most of them in the north of the enclave, Palestinian health officials said, as efforts to secure a ceasefire in the more than year-long war resumed in Qatar. The directors of the CIA and Israel's Mossad intelligence agency plan to meet with Qatar's prime minister on Sunday in Doha. An official briefed on the talks told Reuters. The negotiations will seek a short-term ceasefire and the release of some hostages being held by Hamas in exchange for Israel's release of Palestinian prisoners, the official said. The talks aimed to get Israel and Hamas to agree to a halt in fighting for less than a month, in the hope it would lead to a more permanent ceasefire. There was no immediate comment from Hamas, but a Palestinian official close to the mediation effort told Reuters, "I expect Hamas would listen to the new offers, but it remains determined that any agreement must end the war and get Israeli forces out of Gaza." The United States, Qatar, and Egypt have been leading negotiations to bring an end to the war, which broke out after Hamas fighters stormed into southern Israel on October 7th last year, killing 1,200 people and taking more than 250 hostages by Israeli tallies. The death toll from Israel's retaliatory campaign in Gaza is approaching 43,000, Gaza health officials say, with its densely populated enclave in ruins. At least 43 of those killed on Sunday were in northern Gaza, where Israeli troops have returned to root out Hamas fighters, who it says have regrouped there. 20 people were killed following an airstrike on houses in Jabalia, the largest of the Gaza Strip's 8 historic refugee camps, medics and the Palestinian official news agency WAFA said. An Israeli airstrike on a school sheltering displaced Palestinian families in Shati camp in Gaza City killed 9 people and wounded 20 others, with many in critical condition, medics said. Footage circulated on Palestinian media, which Reuters could not immediately verify, showed people rushing to the bomb site to help evacuate the casualties. The Israeli military said it was looking into the report on the strike on the school. 2 local journalists were among those killed at the school in Shati: Saeed Radwan, head of digital media at Hamas Al-Aqsa Television, and Hanin Baroud, according to Hamas media. On Sunday, Israel's military said it had killed more than 40 militants in the Jabalia area in the past 24 hours, as well as dismantling infrastructure and locating large quantities of military equipment. In addition, Israel said its forces had eliminated a militant cell in a clash in central Gaza. Israeli military strikes on the towns of Jabalia, Beit Hanun, and Beit Lahia in northern Gaza have so far killed around 800 people during a 3-week offensive, the Gaza Health Ministry said. Palestinian health officials said the Israeli aerial and ground offensive has wrecked the healthcare system in northern Gaza and was blocking medical teams from reaching bombed sites. Iranian officials should determine how best to demonstrate Iran's power to Israel after the Israeli attack on Iran 2 nights ago. Iran's official IRNA news agency cited the country's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei as saying on Sunday, "The evil committed by the Zionist regime, Israel, 2 nights ago should neither be downplayed nor exaggerated." IRNA cited Khamenei as saying. Iran on Saturday played down Israel's overnight air attack against Iranian military targets, saying it caused only limited damage, as U.S. President Joe Biden called for a halt to escalation. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday that Israel's airstrikes hit hard Iran's defenses and missile production. The Air Force attacked through Iran. We hit hard Iran's defense capabilities and its ability to produce missiles that are aimed at us, Netanyahu said, calling the attack precise and powerful, and saying it met all its objectives. The Iranian parliament speaker, Mohammad Bakir Kalibaf, said Iran was entitled to self-defense and its response will be definite, in compliance with the requirements. Separately, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Iran was no longer able to use its allies Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon against Israel. Gallant said Hamas was no longer functioning as a military network in Gaza, and that Hezbollah's senior command and most of its missile capabilities had been eliminated. Hamas has repeatedly said it is still able to function militarily, and Hezbollah has said its command structure remains intact and that it retains significant missile capabilities. In addition, the United Nations Security Council is expected to meet on Monday to discuss Israel's attack on Iran, diplomats said on Sunday. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araki called on the Security Council to meet over the attack, and diplomats said the council was likely to discuss the situation on Monday. Heavy fighting in Lebanon between Israeli forces and Iran-backed Hezbollah continued on Sunday, with an Israeli airstrike killing 8 people in a residential block in Sidon, medics said. On Sunday, the Israeli military urged residents of 14 villages in southern Lebanon to evacuate immediately and move north of the Awali River. Elsewhere in the south, a strike on Zatar al-Sharika killed 3 people, and a Saturday bombing of Marahayun killed 5, it said. Israel said 4 of its soldiers were killed in South Lebanon fighting. Hezbollah also said it had fired a large missile salvo at the Zevulun military industries facility north of Haifa in northern Israel. Officials. Russia Behind PA Ballots Video by Josh Mayer. U.S. intelligence officials have confirmed that a viral video spreading online showing mail-in ballots being destroyed in the key battleground suburb of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, is a hoax perpetuated by Russia as part of its covert effort to help elect former President Donald Trump. A federal official exclusively told USA Today on Friday that authorities believed that was the case, based on the specifics of the video and the fact that it was targeting Vice President Kamala Harris and trying to boost Trump's electoral chances. Less than 12 hours later, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence confirmed that assessment in a statement issued Friday night with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. The video, which began circulating Thursday, shows a stack of sealed mail ballot envelopes on a table as an unidentified man proceeded to open them and tear up mail-in ballots with votes for Trump and return ballots for Harris. Expletive Donald Trump, the man in the video said repeatedly as he ripped up the ballots. It was the 3rd time in a month that the 3 agencies formally attributed a fake video attacking Harris or her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, to Moscow as part of an intensive U.S. effort to make the American public aware of the Kremlin's online propaganda efforts. The intelligence community, the new statement said, assesses that Russian actors manufactured and amplified a recent video that falsely depicted an individual ripping up ballots in Pennsylvania, judging from information available to the IC and prior activities of other Russian influence actors, including videos and other disinformation activities. This Russian activity is part of Moscow's broader effort to raise unfounded questions about the integrity of the U.S. election and stoke divisions among Americans, as detailed in prior ODNI election updates, said the statement. In the lead-up to Election Day and in the weeks and months after, the IC expects Russia to create and release additional media content that seeks to undermine trust in the integrity of the election and divide Americans. The intelligence officials have been holding a series of briefings with reporters in Washington detailing the latest efforts by Russia, and China and Iran, to meddle in the election to inform the public. They have also declassified top-secret intelligence about Russia's efforts, headed by President Vladimir Putin, and made it public in Election Security Update reports accompanying the briefings. In the most recent briefing last week, officials said Russia in particular had ramped up its efforts to intervene and boost Trump's chances as the November 5th election nears. and they said in the latest declassified memo that Russia is behind a fake video smearing Walsh with sexual abuse allegations. The intelligence officials also warned that Russia's efforts to help Trump and Iran's efforts to hurt his candidacy due to his hardline policies toward Tehran will continue after the election, especially if Trump contests a loss, as he has strongly suggested he will. And officials said on September 23rd that Russia also made and circulated a widely viewed fake video showing a young girl purporting to be a paralyzed victim of a hit-and-run car accident by Harris in San Francisco. Bucks County officials issued a public warning late Thursday that they were aware of the fake video and had contacted the FBI, Pennsylvania Office of Attorney General, and Pennsylvania Department of State about it. On Friday morning, a federal official told USA Today that the video bears all the hallmarks of being part of Russia's influence operation, and that it had triggered an investigation by the 3 federal agencies. The federal official also said that authorities believe there are many more fake election videos in circulation, in which Russia films people pretending to be Americans to boost pro-Trump and anti-Harris narratives, to sow general chaos, and to undermine confidence in the U.S. electoral system. Recent polls show the presidential election contest to be a dead heat. That makes Pennsylvania, especially Bucks County, an affluent suburb just outside Philadelphia, a critical swing area in determining the outcome. In the previous 2 presidential elections, Montgomery and Bucks counties cast more ballots combined than Philadelphia, which alone accounted for 10% of the 6.1 million votes totaled in 2020, and 11.5% of the 6.1 million votes counted in 2020. Next to Luzerne County, Bucks County has the narrowest divide among Republican and Democratic voters. Republicans make up about 41.6% of voters, while Democrats make up about 41% of voters, according to voter registration data from earlier this month. Both candidates have focused intensively on Bucks County and neighboring areas. Last week, Trump worked the fry machine at a McDonald's in Feasterville, and later claimed he did so to show he had spent 15 minutes more than Kamala working at the iconic fast food chain. Report warns gambling a threat to public health by Eduardo Cuevas. Celebrities like Drake post on Instagram about their winnings from online casinos. Podcast ads plug sports betting. Friends casually work parlay into group texts. Gambling has reached new levels worldwide, and a new report by an international commission of 22 health and policy experts warns of gambling's risks in the era of easy online access. Our conclusion is clear. Gambling poses a threat to public health, said the report published Thursday in the Lancet Public Health Journal. Researchers from the World Health Organization and other institutions on 5 continents said controlling this growing problem requires a substantial expansion and tightening of gambling industry regulation. Gambling disorder, or addiction, has been widely studied for decades. A key factor differs from other forms of addiction. With gambling, people don't hit a wall the way people overdose on drugs, unless they run out of money. And Las Vegas-style slot machines and game day wagers are easier to access than ever. Anyone with a mobile phone now has access to what is essentially a casino in their pocket, 24 hours a day, Heather Wardle, the Commission's co-chair and a professor of gambling research and policy at the University of Glasgow in Scotland, said in a statement. Highly sophisticated marketing and technology make it easier to start and harder to stop gambling. Worldwide, nearly 450 million adults participate in what's called risk gambling, which can impact finances, mental health, relationships, and work, according to the report, which was based on a review and analysis of prior gambling studies. Risk gambling leads to behavioral changes that impact a person's life and/or health, the report says. Around 80 million people arrive at a more severe form, called gambling disorder, or problematic gambling. The researchers said that number is likely an undercount. Gambling disorder affects nearly 16% of adults and more than 26% of adolescents who use online casinos or slot machine games, the report estimated. Addiction is estimated to affect almost 9% of adults and more than 16% of teens who engage in sports betting. Gambling can also increase a person's risk for suicide and domestic violence, the report noted. Joe Maloney, Senior Vice President of Strategic Communications at the American Gaming Association, an industry group, said the gambling industry has worked with state regulators to foster a safe and responsible environment. Since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned a ban on sports betting in 2018, Maloney said in a statement, "The industry has made significant investments toward advancing responsible gaming initiatives, expanding available consumer resources, and developing tools to promote safer gambling." Researchers recommended governments prioritize health rather than the tax money the businesses could bring. If you or someone you know is struggling with gambling, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER, operated by the National Council on Problem Gambling. Diamond ruins senior night festivities for Bristol Plymouth, by Stephen Sanchez. The Diamond football team came into Friday's Mayflower contest with Bristol Plymouth feeling angry. The Bengals were still smarting after taking it on the chin against Old Colony last week. Not to mention the players could not attend their homecoming dance on the same night. So instead, Diamond took its frustration out on the Craftsmen. Obviously, we come in with the mindset every week to do just what we did to BP tonight, said Bengals senior quarterback Sam Perry after a dominating 42-6 road victory at Taunton High School. Some weeks don't go your way, and this week it seems like everything, defense, special teams, and offense were firing against them. They could not stop it. Perry had a night to remember under center for Diamond, 6-1. After misfiring on his first 4 passes, the Bengals quarterback completed 11 of his next 12 throws for 238 yards. He finished with 3 touchdown passes and a rushing touchdown. 6 of Perry's passes went for 20 yards or more. Perry's teammate, running back Ethan Picard, also enjoyed a big game, rushing for a game-high 115 yards on 17 carries and a touchdown. "It just feels great," Picard said. "I couldn't have done it without my offensive line." Then there was the defense of Diamond, which pretty much held BP scoreless. Thaniel Labrie had the Craftsman's lone score from 56 yards out as time was running down in the 4th quarter. "I think the kids were motivated all week at practice, and they unleashed that tonight," Bengals head coach Luke Berry said. As for the Craftsmen, it wasn't the outcome they expected on senior night. "Diamond's a pretty good football team, and I know they were going to go hungry after last week," BP first-year head coach Roger Saravia said. "For us, we have to play better football. Bottom line, it starts with me as a coach. I have to coach better, and we have to play better come Friday night. This is a little gut check time for our team, and the season is not over." The Bengals got on the board first, thanks to a 4-yard touchdown run by Perry. Logan Uwan added the point after. After both teams failed to move the football, Diamond's Logan McKenzie stepped in front of an Alex Tacchini pass and took it back for 46 yards on a pack-6 to give the Bengals a 14-0 cushion. In the second quarter, Perry tossed his first touchdown pass to Peyton Massey, a 26-yard play that gave Diamond a 21-0 lead. Perry then beat the clock just before halftime by completing a 10-yard scoring strike to Uwan that gave the visitors a commanding 28-0 lead. Uwan's 54-yard pass helped set up the score. Perry's third touchdown pass to James McKenzie enabled the Bengals to go up 35-0. Picard put the icing on a big night with a 28-yard touchdown run with 7 minutes 32 seconds left in the game. "Ethan is like the perfect teammate," Bari said. "We would like to get him more in the end zone, but he does not care. I was really pumped to see him score that long touchdown right there. He deserves it. All he cares about is the team. It was great to bounce back and see a lot of kids play tonight." And that's all I have time for. This is your reader, Robert Worm, saying thanks for listening.